drive-in cheesy mad scientist, and I like it. It's so hammy. It's so hammy. I want to fucking throw it on a slice of bread with some cheese. It's really good. Hey guys, welcome to the Video Express, where we dust off old VHS tapes and discuss all things horror, sci-fi, and exploitation. I'm Matt.
And I'm Katie.
Katie, tell our fine listeners what movie we're spotlighting on tonight's show.
All right, so tonight we are talking about The Dead Pit from 1989, written and directed by Brett Leonard.
Yes, The Dead Pit. Can you tell folks at home who has more than likely not seen this movie, maybe a little bit about it?
Yeah, so just kind of a brief synopsis here. A renegade doctor is shot dead and entombed with his fiendish experiments in the basement of an abandoned wing of a mental hospital. He's actually doing like lobotomies on patients and then carrying them down into the basement to do God knows what. Anyway, we'll get into it.
Ooh.
20 years later, a mysterious woman is admitted with amnesia, and her arrival is marked by an earthquake, which cracks the seal to the dead pit, freeing the evil doctor to continue his work.
Wow.
That's pretty much it.
Now, folks, that sounds amazing, right? It's a shame that it's not. Anyway, before we go any further, Katie, why don't you tell the fine folks what's going on in the cinema world today?
Okay, so I've got a few horror anniversaries and one like movie recommendation. So today, the day that this episode is coming out is March 10th, 2021, and we've got some anniversaries. So the first one is The Hills Have Eyes. The 2006 version is turning 15.
Yay!
I haven't seen that one like since it came out, I don't think. It's been a long time.
It's so good.
We also I remember it being pretty gnarly. It's just been a long time. And then these next two, Matt, I have not seen these, but you suggested these.
Yes,
this is Frogs 1972 is turning 49.
Yep.
And then we have The Church from 1989 is turning 32.
Yay!
So, I don't know.
So
happy birthday, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to Frogs, starring none other than Sam Elliott.
Oh, really?
Yes, a very young Sam
Awesome.
Sam Elliott, sans mustache, going up against a bunch of carnivorous frogs. It's just as batshit crazy as it sounds, and it's a fucking slew of fun.
And what about The Church? I haven't seen that one either.
So The Church is a class. Well, I mean, classic to me, I should say, Italian film. And what's really funny is it's sometimes billed as a sequel to other Italian horror films. So I'm a huge fan, of course, of Demons, which was produced by Dario Argento,
Yes.
and of course Demons 2. And this movie, The Church, was billed originally as Demons 3. Although it has little to nothing at all to do with the movie. But it is still produced by Dario Argento. And that's pretty much the only ties to it. But it's of course about like some demonic entities within a church and spooky stuff. And there's like a devil sex scene on an altar. It's, you got to see it. It's,
classic.
Classic kind of stuff. It's got Asia Argento in it. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so
okay, well that sounds interesting to me. I'll probably have to check that one out. And then the only suggestion that I have is a movie that I haven't seen yet, and this movie actually comes out tomorrow, March 11th. So this movie will be on Shudder tomorrow, and it's called Stay Out of the Fucking Attic. So it's already got a great name. And I'll just read you the little blurb here. It sounds very interesting. Spoiler alert: it looks like there's some evil Nazi science experiments going on in this one, similar to another suggestion I had in a previous episode. Anyway, a diverse group of ex cons who work as movers are convinced by their creepy client to stay the whole night to finish the job for a generous pay bump. So the guy's like, "You got to pack everything up and get it done tonight, and I'll pay you like triple." And they're like, "Okay." And then slowly over the night, it's like this big, creepy Victorian mansion, and they discover there's like booby traps, human experimentation, Nazi monsters, and more apparently. And
Wow.
so I watched the trailer, and it looks pretty gory, pretty intense, but kind of funny too at parts. So I'm definitely very excited to check that out. So yeah, once again, stay out of the fucking attic. That will be on Shutter tomorrow, March 11th.
I really hope this like is the beginning of like something like a trilogy. Like, so you got stay out of the fucking attic and then like stay out of the fucking basement and something like that.
Yes.
Like all those movies from like
Yes.
the 70s and early 80s, like don't go into the house, don't go into the basement, all those fucking don't movies.
I think the third installment of that would be Stay Off My Fucking Lawn, and it would be about just like an old man who wants the kids to go away.
Good stuff. Well, Katie, thank you for the updates. So now that that's over, let's go ahead and roll into the Dead Pit. Katie, this is your first time viewing. Tell me what you thought about the movie.
Yeah, so I think there are things to like about this movie for sure. I'm really into it's got pretty great special effects. Well, not great, but like fun, practical special effects. Some better than others. It's got a pretty interesting setting, and I'm really into like the lighting and like the just production design of it in general.
Hmm.
And I think it's got a really cool villain, but the acting's kind of bad and like it's just kind of slow. Like the zombies don't actually even show up until like the third act, and they barely really have a role in it, it seems. So that was a little disappointing to me. And then ultimately, I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it kind of sometimes is both. The whole movie just felt like a scene that I would walk past, like at a haunted house attraction. Like every haunted house has that, like, the like mad scientist and his weird experiments gone awry. And it just felt like I was walking past that
Right.
constantly.
No, so I agree with you. The winner of the movie is not the actors, it's not the makeup effects, it's the lighting, for sure. That's one thing that I noticed
Yeah.
while watching it again was how I mean, I wouldn't say like it's expert lighting, but it's lighting that
Yeah.
totally captures the perfect mood for the settings and stuff like that. So that was the standout to me
Hmm.
while rewatching this was definitely the lighting.
Yeah, I feel like there's a specific shot I'm thinking of where the main character Jane Doe, she's like running down this hallway of like the of an abandoned wing, and there's just like red and blue light like kind of in the room coming into the room, but then there's these like just white light coming in through the blinds, and it's kind of hazy. It's very moody, like you said. You nailed it. Like they kind of went style over substance with this movie, I feel like, in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. While watching this movie, it sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing when you watch a movie and it immediately makes you start thinking of other movies. Um, but on this
Yeah.
case, like I noticed while watching this movie, it's got that very specific like haze to the movie. Now, of course, there's scenes that takes place in the hospital where it's supposed to be like kind of hazy and moody looking, but then there's scenes where just like random everyday shit's happening, and still the movie has this like I don't want to say blurry, but it's just like a hazy look to it, and
Yeah.
it's so funny because immediately it made me think of other movies of that exact era. Like there's so many direct to video movies basically from like between 1987 to like 1992. A lot of the straight to video I don't want to say bargain basement horror films, but I mean that's kind of what they were, had that look to them. And I used to think that it was a style choice. I thought maybe it was intentional.
Hmm.
Now I'm starting to wonder if it like since these movies were a little bit lower rent, lower budget, if it wasn't something to do with like maybe the film stock or the cameras themselves, um, that gives them like that weird hazy look. It's weird. Like the best
Yeah.
way I can describe it is everybody looks like they should be sweaty even though they're not. Does that make sense? It looks like the whole movie looks humid.
Yes.
It looks humid.
It's a okay, that's a really good way to describe it, and I mean, it's one of those it's like, even if it's not intentional, it just makes the movie it just serves the movie in a positive way because,
Kinda
like, it
icky.
just adds this dreamlike, disorienting kind of, like, element to it, and
Right.
our main character has lost her memory and is very confused, so I think it kind of adds to that.
Well, you said our main character, and of course her. We know her for 99% of the movie is just Jane Doe. She's a girl who doesn't know who she is, and she just got thrown into this mental institute. So since we've already brought that up, why don't we go ahead and start talking about the characters and the actors, the good and bad of the movie, which I think unfortunately is mostly bad.
Mhm.
Not to say that there's not
Mm,
charming aspects to these characters, but let's
mhm.
talk about Jane Doe first, who of course was played by Cheryl Lawson.
Yeah, so I okay, first of all, I love her look. Like she's got amazing hair. Like I
Yeah,
was hypnotized by her huge mane of curly hair. That was just like perfect the entire movie, which is funny. Um
she looks like she should be crawling around on like the hood of a car in like a Whitesnake video.
yes, absolutely. She totally has that like 80s babe look,
And then
like down
I
pat.
will say this,
Um
not to keep interrupt you, but I do have to drive home the fact that her not only is her hair amazing, but she is fucking hot. Like she is like
yeah, she's super
major
hot.
babe. Yeah. But anyway, I had to get that
Yeah.
out. Go ahead.
No. She is super hot. Unfortunately, not the best actor.
No.
Um, I think it's really hit her. There's times when like when she's supposed to be, you know, kind of frantic and she's got a great. This is a weird thing to say. She has a great scream.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just liked it. It's her like when she was like freaking out. It was believable or at least entertaining to me. She kind of fell flat in some of the like more toned down just conversations where she was just kind of being normal.
Right.
But that being said, you know, she still did a pretty good job, you know, just as an actor.
Yeah.
Um, as a character, I think, you know, it's a really interesting premise to join a protagonist like right after they've lost all their memory and they don't know who they are. And so you're kind of like thrust into the situation with her where she's put into this mental asylum and she's just like, I don't belong here. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. But that being said, I'm so confused by like, why did they put her in a mental institute? Like, I just am very confused by that. They said they like found her wandering like in a park or something, and then they said something about like the court sending her to this asylum, but I don't know.
What do you mean you don't? Katie, she had to get there somehow. What do you expect? How's this movie going to happen if they don't
I
throw
mean,
her in
exactly. Yeah.
there?
Okay, I mean, knowing what I know now about a little bit about the production of this movie, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I mean, I get it. I understand why this plot is a little bare bones, but that's probably like one of my main complaints is like there's just stuff like that that doesn't get explained or fleshed out in any way, but they
Right.
have all this time in the movie to explore it that they just spend on these really long, unnecessary scenes where nothing happens.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. It's I think you kind of you said it best. It sums it up where the movie as a whole is a great premise. It's just
Hmm.
it just falls flat. Um, it's packed full of some really great ideas. Just none of them are just really
Yes.
fleshed out good enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, just bringing it back to like Jane as a character, I think, you know, we mentioned how attractive she is. She kind of is just like in this tank top, crop top,
It's
and
amazing.
bikini panties like for 90% of the movie,
Yes.
which
Like
which I love because it seems so just like it seems so ridiculous, and then but it's perfect. Like it just fits the movie perfectly somehow. And I actually found out that apparently they wanted her to wear that like that hospital gown for like most of the movie.
Uh-huh.
And Cheryl Lawson, the actor, she thought it made her look quote unquote large, so she didn't want to wear it. So she like cut part of it off to I guess make it like shorter or something, but then as they kept washing it, it just kept shrinking and getting smaller and smaller. So either I'm not exactly sure what happened. Either the like crop top she's wearing is just like what's left of that gown, or they just said fuck it that we can't use this anymore and they just threw her in this like crop top t-shirt.
I'm thinking this during that crop top and panties, which like you said, it's
uh,
amazing.
yeah.
Um, and I again, the movie's not a fucking fantastic movie. However, you got a fine woman walking around like that for like a good, I would honestly say 95% of the movie. She's wearing that. Um,
Yeah.
so that at least bumps it up a couple stars. Um,
It makes it at least worth a watch.
yeah. So Cheryl Lawson, the actress who plays Jane Doe, for anybody listening that's like me, that's hardcore into the '80s VHS era, you might know her from another small, almost unheard of film called The Vineyard. But Cheryl Lawson's also, I do know that she's most well known as a stunt woman, and she's still working today in
Yes.
films. She was in the True Detective, the series. I would say it's somewhat newly found Christmas classic, Santa's Sleigh, starring Goldberg. She did stunts for that. She did the
Mhm.
stunts in Spider-Man 2. She was the main stunt woman double for, I believe, Kelly Hu was the actress's name in The Scorpion King. I could be wrong. I think it's something like that. She was
Mhm.
in anyway.
No, that's right. I was literally just looking at it on IMDb.
I would say the chick from Friday the 13th Part 8. But anyway, she was the stunt double for her, and she was also stunt woman in the Boogeyman 2, not to be confused by the Uli Lomel Boogeyman series, but the shitty early 2000s Boogeyman movies. So
Oh, no.
yeah, but good on her. Like she
She's had quite a career.
yeah, she honestly has and good on her. I mean, she's a great at what she does. She likes what she does, and she keeps doing it. And again, she's fucking hot. So we got that
Yeah.
going on. Um, I'll piggyback off of what you said about her. She's got a great scream. She's good at coming off as worried and scared, but she is so monotone when it comes to like the build up moments where she's just having conversations with um what's his name, Chris, the other guy that's in the asylum with her,
Yeah.
and all of her scenes with Dr. Swan, who's played by Jeremy Slate. Like any scene that we're supposed to kind of feel any empathy or feel any kind of emotion towards her, it just kind of falls flat. Uh, but I 100%
Yeah.
agree. Again, it this movie has so much potential. I don't want to say wasted potential because the reason I put the movies that I put on our list of things to talk about is because I feel like every movie that's on my list, whether we view them as good or bad, I think are they deserve a shot, at least a one time view, and that's why I really
Yeah.
want to dig into this movie. Again, we're coming right out the fucking bat swinging, you know, telling you folks that it's not a great movie, but I do think there's so much potential and fun behind it that to give it a shot. But enough about that. We talked about Jane Doe, our quote unquote main character. Let's talk about I guess let's move on to Dr. Swan, played by Jeremy Slate. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I didn't recognize Jeremy Slate. Turns out he was like a huge TV actor all through the 50s, 60s,
Huge.
70s. I'm sure you're going to drop some knowledge about that very shortly. But as a character, I thought he was a kind of an interesting mix in this, in that he's the one who kills the evil Dr. Ramsey at the beginning. So he's been like keeping this secret because as far as I know,
Right.
they didn't really tell anybody what happened to him. They just sealed him up down in the basement and were like, let's pretend that never happened.
He's so weird.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought he was believable as like a doctor. The hypnosis scenes were kind of interesting to me because I don't know how I feel about hypnosis just in general, but I don't know. I would say the coolest thing that he gets to do in the movie is he gets his head cut open and a bunch of pins put in his brain. So that's probably the coolest part.
Yeah. I'm not gonna, be a complete nerd and fucking drop every piece of uh cinema that Jeremy Slate's been in, but but yeah, he was a huge Western TV actor. And for anybody that knows me really well, horror is my number one favorite genre, and westerns are my second favorite. So of course, I saw him in a lot of Western TVs growing up. He was on Gunsmoke. He was actually in True Grit, the original True Grit with John Wayne. So the
Oh,
guy
nice.
definitely has. I mean, and then he was like an Al Fan that we talked about on the last episode. This guy was Jeremy Slate was almost in at least one episode of every TV show from like
Yeah.
1959 to like fuck man like 2003 or some shit like that. Like it's kind of hard. I haven't even looked at his resume lately, but I'm sure it's like a fucking 5 miles long.
It's very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the dude's got the chops, the dude knows the
I
shit. I would say, when you look at this movie, I don't think I know Cheryl Lawson, was a stunt woman, but other than Vineyard and this, I had never seen her in anything else. But when it comes to all the other
Mhm.
actors in this movie, I have never seen them before, which basically tells me that Jeremy Slate was their name person for this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all I can say to that is
Jeremy Slate is to oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just saying Jeremy Slate is to this movie what Christopher Lee was to The Howling 2.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? You're absolutely right, but the biggest difference there is at least they fucking utilized Christopher Lee to to their
Yeah.
to their fullest potential that they could. I feel like that's the one thing I noticed about rewatching this movie. It's always felt like, when looking back on the movie, of course, it's been, let's see, I've been living in my new house for 5 years, and it's been at least three. So it's been a good 8 years, probably closer even to 10 since I've watched Dead Pit. So whenever I would think about it, I would always think of Jeremy Slate's character, Dr. Swan, as like the main dude of the movie. But now
Yeah.
watching it, it's like, fuck, this guy literally does nothing. He shows up at the beginning, like you said, he kills
Yeah.
Dr. Ramsey, throws him in the dead pit, basically spackles the entrance, shut, and then 20 years later, his hair is white, and he's harboring this secret of killing Dr. Ramsey. Jane Doe shows up, and then like there's a couple scenes with him where he's hypnotizing her, trying to figure out the weird shit that's going on with her, and then he's actually not a good guy at all. He
Yeah.
realizes there's some connection between Jane Doe and Dr. Ramsey, who is our evil, quote unquote monster of the movie. And when he starts figuring this out, like he's trying to like keep her doped up and throw basically like lock her up and throw away the key. And he's not even our good guy. So it would have been like if you're gonna do that, like if you're gonna like introduce this character who right out the gate is kind of like you're securing him as like kind of like the hero or like the big name of the movie. If you're going to like pull a little bit of a switcheroo like halfway through and kind of like pawn him off as not so much a like really a bad guy, but like he's not doing anything to help anybody. I feel like
Yeah.
it's again that's cool. You could really do something with that, but it just falls flat, and it just comes down to like him just kind of feeling like a wasted potential of a character.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like what I was saying before. Like there's a lot of parts in this movie that don't feel fleshed out at all.
Right.
They kind of just gloss over a lot of stuff, and I'm totally with you. Like I think if that character had been featured a little bit more throughout the movie, as far as like us kind of seeing maybe either him talking to somebody or him just having some sort of inner monologue where we like see that he's like figuring these things out or like struggling with the secret that he's keeping, or just something to make him more prominent in the movie, because like he really didn't have anything to do other than hypnotize her, and then all of a sudden at the end he just like, it's like a switch flips and he's suddenly like not the bad guy, like you said, he's not the bad guy, but just like this kind of out for his own selfish reasons kind
Right.
of person all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's like I said, usually my theme every episode, I usually use the word serviceable when it comes to either the plot or the characters or the actors. But I'm not going to. I think my theme this episode is going to be potential, which this movie has, but a
Yeah.
lot of it is wasted. And like again, I think he was for sure wasted. Um, now again, even though he is a very popular television actor, I don't see him costing the production an arm and a leg. So I don't think it was maybe, because let's face it, a lot of movies when you get a name in, and I can speak from experience. I mean, I've worked with some names where we've had to fly them in, shoot their fucking scenes as quick as possible, and fly them the fuck back out because our we don't have the budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that being the case here. Especially when literally the entire
Yeah.
cast is made up of no names, and he's like the only name. And he's not even like again, not trying to knock, not trying to knock Jeremy Slater or anything, but he's not like he's a gigantic name. But
Right.
he's got a cool look, and again, you're establishing this guy at the very beginning as the guy who took down this evil doctor, and now 20 years later he's still there, and then that's it. What I'm saying? There's really nothing else to it.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of just, he just kind of fades into the background. He just fades into the background like for most of the movie. Like he just is there only occasionally to pop in and not, I don't know. He just, yeah, I'm basically repeating everything you've already said. But yeah, he definitely is underutilized, and there was a lot of potential for his little subplot that they didn't flesh out at all.
Right. Now it's funny. I with the whole hypnotizing scenes and stuff like that, where he like we said, he hypnotizes Jane Doe and tries to dig a little bit deeper into her psyche and trying to figure out what's going on with her and shit, and trying to make her remember who she is and where she came from and all that kind of shit. I couldn't help but think of Dr. Neil Gordon from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, which is of course is the good
Oh, yeah.
guy. Yeah, the good guy doctor from Nightmare 3, and who it kind of comes off that way. And had they went that route, like Jeremy Slate's character really could have come off as like this, a good guy. But then, like I said, it just kind of almost pulls a swerve. And once he figures out like her past or that she's linked somehow to Dr. Ramsey, he's like, nah, fuck this. But speaking of, so yeah, speaking of, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So that movie came out in 1987, which was of course 2 years before this movie. But you know what other movie came out in 1987, 2 years before Dead Pit?
What?
Hellraiser 2. And I couldn't help but just think of
Oh.
Hellraiser 2, the entire time I watched Dead Pit. It's it's got that hazy atmosphere that I was talking about, that hazy look to the movie, which oozes all over Hellraiser Part 2. We got a mental institute. We've got close-ups of mental patients, and there was a lot of creepy doctor doing experiments and shit. So there's a lot of parallels with Hellraiser 2, I felt, and again, you got a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 thrown into the mix.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Hellraiser 2, because I fucking love Hellraiser 2, and I was wondering, I kind of felt the same thing as I was watching this movie, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But you totally nailed it. Like the similar like setting, similar lighting, like the haziness. The thing that specifically jumped out to me that made me think of Hellraiser just in general as a franchise is towards the beginning they show one of Dr. Ramsey's like patients on the table, and he's got part of like the back of his head like kind of split open, and like it looks like it's almost like held together, like held open with sutures or something.
Right.
And it looked very similar. It just reminded me of that one Cenobite that's got like her throat like splayed open and like held open with those things.
Right. The
And so
female.
yeah,
Yeah.
I also got a Hellraiser 2 vibe from that.
Yeah. I would say it's kind of hard to just stand up and point your finger and be like, oh well, they definitely had an inspiration, because you got to figure this is the '80s we're talking about, so movies. Yeah, we're spoiled nowadays. A movie can be out in theaters, and literally like 2 weeks later will be out, streaming or on Blu-ray or whatever. Back in those days, a movie would come out in
Yeah.
theaters, and it would be a fucking year, or sometimes more before it hit home video. So the chances that somebody went to the Cineplex to watch Hellraiser 2 in theaters and threw together a script and a budget and made this movie, while it is likely, we can't confirm that. So
Yeah.
it's fun to point and like I said, compare the two and see the like familiarity of the two. But I'm not going to sit here and accuse the filmmakers of ripping it off by any means.
Yeah, like I think that's more of a, like kind of like you were saying earlier, like that's more of just an indication of like the era of just like kind of everybody kind of making similar movies just because that was the kind of vibe of the time, and
Right.
less that they were trying to copy. I don't even think they were trying to like copy Hellraiser at all, but I think just naturally kind of a lot of movies around that era probably had a similar look.
Absolutely. Yeah, look and feel. All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about our other. I guess again, Jeremy Slate's character of Doctor Swan, who you think is going to be our male hero, our male protagonist. It actually turns out being another character by the name of Chris Myers, who is a fellow inmate
Yeah.
at this asylum, played by Stephen Gregory Foster. Katie, tell me what you thought of this character of Chris Myers.
I liked his character. I thought he's pretty charming. I mean, I think that's kind of the whole point of the character, is that he's so charming that he's like flirting with the nurses and stuff, and they don't really treat him as badly as everyone else. But um yeah, basically, for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, he is in the asylum temporarily because he likes to blow things up. That's just his thing. And he got in a little bit of trouble, so he opted to go to this asylum instead of jail. I don't really know how that works, but I guess it worked for him. And yeah, so kind of throughout the movie, he's one of the only other patients that Jane Doe really talks to, and they kind of form a friendship that you kind of get the feeling that maybe it's going to be like a romance thing, but they never really like fully go down that path. They just kind of help each other out. And yeah, he kind of just saves the day there at the end. Like
Yeah,
he's pretty
absolutely.
much the hero of the whole movie.
Yeah, so he's a former demolitions expert, I believe, for the army. Um, and I think he said something like
Yeah, that's right.
when he finally got out of the army, he still had that itch of blowing shit up, so he couldn't help himself. So he blew, I don't know what he blew up, but he blew some shit up and got in trouble for it. And they kind of took it easy on him, I guess, because of his background in the army. So he was able to plead insanity and gets and serve quote unquote, I guess, time at the mental institute instead of going to prison. However, what I really like, any good movie, any filmmaker that at least has the slightest iota of knowledge of what they're doing when making a movie, one of the biggest rules is set up and payoff. And the golden rule about setups and payoffs is you set it up first act, you pay it off in the third act. And
Hmm.
again, this movie's not great, but it's got some cool things about it. It's got some good potential about it. And I really like, of course, it's no use for us to keep, saying anything about spoilers. Spoilers, this is what this show is all about. It's talking about the movie in depth. So, we're introduced to this character And again, yeah, like you said, he's charming. Um, and we find out that he's a demolitions expert. He likes blowing shit up. That's why he's there. And that's all established in the first act. And of course, in the third act, him having the knowledge of blowing shit up is what saves the day. And I love that aspect of his character. I love that that was set up and it was paid off. Not only is it a payoff, but it's how we defeat the evil of the movie. I think that was a really good setup. As far as the
Yeah.
character, yeah, I would say he's definitely charming. Um, there's something about him, and this is just a personal thing. I don't think everyone's going to feel this way. Uh, there's something about him though to me that almost comes off as like you can't fully trust him. Like he's got this look about him that like
Yeah.
he's like one of those dudes that you would see at a bar and you'd be hanging out with him and like you'd be drinking with him all night and like halfway through the night he'll end up buying you a beer and then a little bit later you buy him a beer and next thing you know you guys are both munching on fucking peanuts and talking about the Cowboys losing the game. It's a real fun night guy, real fucking charming, but the fucking minute that you like get up from the stool and go to the bathroom he's done fucking stole your wallet. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's some kind of
Yeah.
like there's like a slight shadiness to him that he's charming, but I wouldn't leave my money or my kids around him. But again, that's probably just a
Yeah.
personal thing. Maybe it has to do with the Neanderthal Cro-Mag forehead. I don't know.
I mean, he's got like a slyness to him, and I don't necessarily think this is remotely accurate to like real life, but in movies, especially older movies, like when they portray like insane asylums, like everybody in it is really insane. Like it's not just like people with like mild mental illness, it's like people like running around like hitting the walls and just like screaming and crying, and it's all this shit. So like when you have that, which is honestly a lot of this movie, like truly the asylum is understaffed and the patients are pretty much neglected, so they're just kind of like milling about everywhere and it's kind of chaotic. And then you have this guy who's really like cool, calm, and collected, and almost like sly seeming,
Right.
and just the fact that he seems so lucid, and then you find out that he used to be like in the military and he like knows how to blow shit up. Like I don't know, it's just it's a bad sign. So I totally get that interpretation of him.
Um, yeah, definitely, and it's funny that you bring up the mental patients. Like you're absolutely right. In horror movies, especially, whenever we see an insane asylum or anything like that, the inmates, it's like they are nuttier than squirrel shit. Like there's really no
Yeah.
like calmness like there. But I will hand it to them. The ones that they like do close ups of are fucking great. Like those actors are bringing their goddamn A
Yeah.
game. And there's this one loony.
There's like the guy at the very beginning. Oh, sorry.
We're probably
But
about to say the
the
same
guy at the
thing.
very beginning, yeah, he's like towards the beginning and he's like screaming and crying and like looking right at the camera and like getting closer to it.
Okay, yeah, that guy, yeah, he's really good. Um, while I think he's good, I like the guy that they show like directly after that. It's the guy that's he's not screaming, but he's like, please hold my calls, hold my phone calls. Don't
Oh,
tell them I'm not in.
yeah.
Hold my calls like that. Like something about that was to me fucking awesome because not that I've ever been to a fucking mental institute or know anything about it because I don't, but I feel like the best portrayals of loonies is that kind of shit. Because you sometimes you'll see loony
Yeah.
people and they're just like doing like crazy shit, reaching into their underwear and pulling out a wad of shit and eating it, that kind of crap. But I like this, like where they're rambling on about like shit like that, like hold my calls, like a lot of people that have mental illnesses that keep getting worse as time goes on, like they'll remember like one minuscule thing from their past, and they harp on it. And I felt like that was very realistic. Like
Yeah.
this guy maybe had a fucking worked in an office, and that was something that he would say on the regular. Please hold my calls, and for him to keep saying that over and over, like, it felt real, and that actor was really good. And it's almost a shame to say this, but I feel like that guy who's in the movie for literally 1 minute, probably not even that, probably like fucking 40 seconds, is probably the best goddamn actor of the entire movie.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of the background characters were the best, were some of the better actors. And I mean, horror and like movies in general, they've kind of had, not a great track record of portraying mental illness. Like, it's often like mental illness equals scary.
Right.
But with this movie, I feel like even though it does kind of toe that line a little bit, I mean, it was 1989, people weren't, as conscious or talking about these things in the way that we do now. But I feel like it was less like, look how scary these crazy people are, and more, look how scary it is that like these patients are just being like neglected and like not treated well, and this is what happens when you're just like shoved into like a cage basically without any additional like treatment or care.
Right. Yeah, I don't want folks listening that's not seen Dead Pit to think that these asylum inmates are going like full on Simple Jack. Um they're not.
Yeah.
But I feel like I said, the hold the calls guy is like a very like honest to goodness, pretty good portrayal. Not to say that some of the other ones aren't, like, a little bit over the top. There's also the lady that's walking around with the cigarette, and
Oh, she's great.
she is fucking great. Like, I have seen her, like, in real life, like walking around outside of Walmart. Like that
Yeah.
that person exists.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've seen that lady in downtown Seattle, I'm sure.
Right.
Um, so I mean, there is a little kind of before we get to like our main villain here. There is another side character that I really want to talk about, and it's the nun lady, Sister Claire. And I think that we have another member of the Christian Avengers on our hands, Matt. I think she needs to go join Christopher Lee in the woods to explode some werewolves, because this lady, like, okay, so they don't really give her a lot of backstory, and I think that's great. They don't need to, but there's one patient that for most of the movie is just kind of a side character, but eventually she becomes more prominent, which I'll get to. But they never say if she used to be a nun before she came to the asylum, or if she just has a delusion that she is a nun.
Right.
But she's got like one of the hospital gowns like wrapped around her head as if it's like a nun's hood, and she just walks around like flicking water from this little cup on everyone and like saying Catholic prayers. And it's just kind of like this funny little bit that they do throughout the movie. And then at one point, once the zombies kind of all get let loose and they're kind of overrunning the asylum, we've got Jane and Chris. They're running away from a zombie, and they come around the corner, and Sister Claire is there with her quote unquote holy water. And you think the zombie's gonna get her, and she flicks him with the holy water, and the zombie just fucking melts.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, holy water is canon in this universe. Okay. So honestly, I know we're talking about Christian saving the day, which he kind of does, because it wouldn't have happened without him, but it also wouldn't have happened without Sister Claire, because they then decide, let's bless the entire water tower that we're going to blow up,
So fucking
and that
cool.
will melt all the zombies.
Yeah.
So she's my honorary Christian Avenger of this episode.
I dig it. Yeah, she is. I've got her right here on the list. Yeah, she is by far one of the coolest fucking characters. And again, goes right back to what I was saying about Christian Meyer, or Chris Meyer, or whatever the fuck his name is, Christian. Um, about our
Yeah.
demolition expert. Again, with your setup and payoff, because again, way earlier, like in the first act, we are introduced to her, and we think that she's just some fucking nut that thinks she's a nun, when fucking lo and behold, this bitch is, walks the line hand in hand with God himself, and blesses some shit and takes down some undead creatures. It's fucking awesome. and
She has got the Lord on her side
she kicks
against
ass
these
for the Lord. That's
zombies.
for damn sure.
She kicks
Um,
ass for the Lord for
yeah,
sure.
but yeah, she's a great character. I feel like, and again, I do this every fucking time I watch a movie. Uh, this movie could have benefited from some, let's harken back to you brought it up, so let's harken back to Howling 2. This movie could have really benefited from putting together, like, setting up more characters in the asylum that had, like,
Yeah.
something special about them. Where at the end, like, it could have literally been mental patients versus zombies. And that would have been fucking cool because
Yeah.
you've got the nun, you got the demolitions expert, you could have had, some other loon, like he was good at something. They could have set something up where it could have, like, been like a little bit of a
Yeah.
team. Um, but I digress. It didn't happen. It could have happened.
Yeah. But it's funny because you brought up the third Nightmare on Elm Street, and it would be kind of like that. It's
Dream
like you have
Warrior,
your cast of characters, and they'd all kind of have their own thing, and then the
right?
Dream Warriors, or in this case, the Z Warriors. I don't know. They get together and they kick a bunch of zombie ass.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that she takes, like, the hospital gown and, like, wraps it around her head like a nurse's cap or a nurse's hood. You know what I thought it was at first? I thought she, like,
Hmm.
had boxer shorts on her head.
Okay, that's pretty funny. And I mean, I get that, but I just noticed like the pattern on it was the same as the pattern as the gown that they made Jane Doe wear at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, I see. She's just
Well,
that's just fun.
I was like six hams deep at that point, so I was doing a little drinking. All right, so we've gone through our good and not so good cast of characters. Let's go ahead and round it out with the big bad himself, the main antagonist of the film, Dr. Ramsey, played by Danny Goknauer. Tell me what you thought of our evil, spooky Dr. Ramsey.
Okay, I love a good creepy evil mad scientist type character. So I just love the like concept of him in general. I love that he's undead and they don't really explain it at all. Like he just comes back to life with like a gunshot wound in his head and his skin is all gross and he just grows these like demon claws. But then he puts the doctor's gloves over the claws, and something about that is like really unsettling to me. And then he like puts the ring over the glove. Like he just has a great look. And I feel like for the first like 3/4 of this movie, there's no zombies. They haven't even unleashed the dead pit yet. And so he's kind of just like this supernatural slasher type villain for a bit.
Right.
The only person that sees him is Jane Doe. She has nightmares about him. She sees him standing outside her window out in the lawn. And by the way, those are actually some really effective creepy scenes, like when she wakes up at night and he is just out there standing in the lawn staring at her.
Oh, Michael
um
Myers like.
so yeah, it reminded me of that. So I think that's really cool. I don't understand I don't understand what he was doing or why. Like they give this brief explanation where he's like talking about like the difference between like the physical brain and the mind and like separating that somehow. But I don't they never really go into like what his motivation was or how he did anything. That being said, I still thought he was a pretty effective villain. I feel like I'm going to say this every episode. Just would have liked to seen more, maybe.
Yeah.
Would have been cool if he was maybe in it more, doing more stuff. But overall, I thought he was a pretty effective villain.
I've done life. Now I'm doing death. What a fucking
I
line.
wrote down that line. It's so great.
So yeah, Dr. Ramsey, our spooky evil doctor who basically takes inmates down into the cellar of the mental institute, uses a lobotomy pick and shoves it, like, basically through their fucking eye into their brain, and then proceeds to do whatever the fuck it is he does to their brain. And like you said, it's never fleshed out, no pun intended, of what he technically does to them. We just know that there's some kind of experimentation, and when he's done with them, he throws their bodies into a literal dead pit, into a pit of dead bodies. Um,
Mhm.
there's scenes where there's some patients where he's got like he carves like symbols and shit onto their bodies, and we definitely get the feeling like there's some other worldly shit, some supernatural shit, and it's it comes off almost as Lovecraftian in a sense, almost like Lovecraft kind
Yeah.
of weirdness to it. But like, yeah, like you said, it's never fully explained what he's doing. We just know that he shouldn't be doing it. Dr. Swan catches him doing it, shoots him in the fucking head, throws him in the dead pit. 20 years later, Jane Doe shows up at the mental institute. All hell breaks loose. The dead pit cracks open. Doctor, for whatever reason we don't know, returns to life and starts doing shit all over again. Um,
Mhm.
I like I like the look of the character. The glowing red eyes, while can come off as cheesy, I kind of felt came off kind of cool in this movie. Because they are literally like After Effect, well, eight in the by 1980 standards, After Effect,
Yeah.
of the red glowing eyes, and a lot of movies that looks fucking horrendous. But something about it in this movie really worked for that character. And like you said, like him having like the long sharp claws and then slipping on the latex gloves over top of that, well, it was kind of a cool little
I
touch.
love it.
Um, I really the actor, who has never been in anything since or prior. This was his one and only movie. He is really over the fucking top at the very beginning, right before Dr. Swan puts a bullet in his fucking head. He's so like over the top, and he's doing like the all like exaggerated, like wide eyed stare, and
Yes.
he's playing like the typical like drive-in cheesy mad scientist, and I like it. It's so hammy. It's like it's so hammy. I want to fucking throw it on a slice of
Yes.
bread with some cheese. It's really good. Um, but
Yeah.
I feel like as good and hammy and cheesy as much as I ate it up when pre undead, when he does return back to life, like he's no more than just creepy dude watching from outside the window. And he never really gets to shine on anymore in the film. Yeah, there's a couple scenes where he says some shit, but I don't feel like he ever really captures that same mood as he did in the first like fucking 10 minutes of the movie. Which, sorry to keep rambling, I want to bring this up. I want to bring this up for the people that has not seen this movie, and I want to bring it up, of course, to you, Katie, because we haven't talked about this. Everything we need to know about this fucking movie, everything, okay? The setup of who he is, what he does, get him shot in the head, thrown into the dead pit, everything all takes place in the opening fucking credits of this movie. And it is the longest,
Yeah.
most drawn out opening credits I have ever fucking seen. It was literally like 10 minutes long. And it's so fucking funny because it'll be like,
I had blocked that out.
it's like Dead Pit, a Brett Leonard film, white words over a black screen, and then it cuts to Dr. Ramsey doing some spooky shit. Then it'll cut to starring Cheryl Lawson, and then it'll cut back to him doing some creepy shit, and then like cuts to it like, and it just keeps doing this over and over and over again until the next thing you know, by the time it says directed by Brett Leonard, like you look at the fucking clock and 15 minutes has gone by. It's insane how
Yeah,
long it
they
takes.
really I think it's like they were like attempting to build tension, but it just kind of dragged it out, which I think happens a lot in this movie. But I did have
Yeah,
an interesting thought related to what you were saying about his personality, like once he comes back from the dead. And okay, this is just a theory, and this is probably giving way more credit to the filmmakers than they might deserve for this, but I just wonder. So, okay, so he's doing a bunch of lobotomies, which for people who don't know what that is, it was basically a surgical operation that they still do sometimes, but only in very extreme situations. But they were just handing them out like candy all through the first half of the 19th century.
right.
And it basically is they without getting too into like biology and anatomy, they just do some shit to the prefrontal lobe of your brain, and they like cut part of it off from the rest of your brain, supposedly to cure mental illness, quote unquote. But most of the time, it just made people completely void of personality and like feeling and drive to do anything. So
Hmm.
the way that they would do it, they would take like literally the way he kills people in the movie. They would take an ice pick and they'd shove it like under your eyelid into your brain and just scramble things around a little bit and more or less and totally make you into a zombie. So I say all that to say this: he gets shot in the head in the first part in the movie, like right around the same part where I'm pretty sure like they'd be digging around with the ice pick during a lobotomy. So I mean, it's possible that maybe when he comes back to life, like he's lost part of his personality because his brain is damaged. That's a fan theory more than an actual filmmaking theory, but I
I,
don't know. I thought it was interesting.
I get what you're saying. I get it. I like it, but I don't think that they.
I don't think it's true.
I don't think they put that much thought into it. Sadly, um,
I don't think so either.
but you know,
But I do think it's an interesting testament to how like evil and unethical that this doctor was, because the very last like public lobotomy, as far as I know, was like in 1967. Sometime in the 60s, they kind of did one of the last lobotomies, at least that was like publicized. And so by 1969, I'm pretty sure it had started to kind of fall out of vogue, and
right?
he was just doing them in the basement.
Bargain basement lobotomy. Come on down. Get your lobotomy today. Um, so let's you were talking about like maybe possibly that's what they were thinking of doing since he got shot in the forehead. Like I said, I don't think that's they thought that far ahead. But since we're on the subject of the team behind the cameras, let's go ahead and start talking about the
Yes.
director. Let's talk about him first. Brett Leonard. Um,
Yes.
it's I don't do research. Well, after watching these movies, I
I
should.
know a little bit.
I should. However, that's exactly. I'll leave it up to you. The only things I know of Brett Leonard is this. Um, he has done some movies that have really liked in the past. Um, Now again, this has been close to probably 10 years since I had last watched Dead Pit. And I used to, when I was younger, thought this movie was great. I just revisited it and I was like, okay, maybe I was wrong. And these other movies I'm about to mention of his are other movies that I have not seen in 10 plus years. So I don't know if maybe it's the same thing. But I will say, just go on record to say that these are movies that I like. Don't know if I still do. I'll have to revisit them. But as of now, I do know that he did a movie called Hideaway, which is a really, again, from what I remember, is a really fucking good movie. And then he did a movie that I used to fucking just absolutely love, and I watched it so many times in the late 90s. Is Virtuosity, which was one of Denzel Washington and Russell
Oh.
Crowe's first movies. And it is so goddamn good. And I have not, well, again, it's been 10 plus years since I've watched it. And I'm sure it is dated as fuck now because it deals with like, the whole like virtual reality and shit like that. It's
Oh,
basically Russell
yeah.
Crowe is a serial killer that is like created. I don't know how the best way to describe it. He's basically like created like as a virtual person, but it gets made into like comes into real life. Um, and Russell Crowe is so deliciously over the goddamn top that it's ridiculous. He's borderline ridiculous, but it's so good. And it's the first movie that I remember seeing Denzel Washington in. So I need to revisit it, but I will tell you now that you should probably also see Virtuosity. But piggybacking off of the whole virtual movement, Brett Leonard did another movie that I really love, which is The Lawnmower Man, starring Jeff Fahey and Pierce Brosnan.
Mhm.
I love that fucking movie. Matter of fact, it was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. My friend Faye, who's basically runs the Psycho Cinema Film Group at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia. Faye had texted me one day and said, "Hey, they've got this lawnmower man, I think it was like a duffel bag at this thrift shop in Winchester." And if you folks don't know, I don't think they do it as much as they used to, but a lot in like the 80s, 90s, early and mid 2000s, when a new, I mean, I'm sure they did it for non horror movies, but when like new horror and sci fi movies would come out, the production companies would always put out like weird like memorabilia things, like sunglasses with like the movie's name on them, shit like that. It wasn't always just t-shirts. So you get lanyards, um, new like little rubber like pocket change holders, like it's stuff like that with like the movie's name on it.
Yeah.
But she had hit me up. She was like, "Hey, there's a Lawnmower Man duffel bag at this thrift store," because she knew I liked that movie. So I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna get that for my collection. That's kind of cool." So I rolled down to this fucking thrift store, and sure enough, there's this badass Lawnmower Man duffel bag, and I'm getting ready to grab it. They also have an original 1984 Terminator sunglasses, right, from the original movie that looks just like the ones that
Whoa.
Arnold wore, and it says Terminator on the sides. Shit, like they had a bunch of shit like that. But I picked up that goddamn duffel bag, and you know what? It was $500. You know what I did with that? I put it right back down.
Whoa.
Yeah, but anyway, sorry to
Yeah,
go off on this.
you know,
Yeah. Sorry to go off on this tangent about Lawnmower Man. But yes.
yeah.
Yes. So yes, Brett Leonard did Lawnmower Man, which I will throw out. Uh Jeremy Slate, who plays Dr. Swan, is also in Lawnmower Man. Not a huge part, but he's in it.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of people, of course, now I can't remember the names at all, but I think a couple of people in this cast, like even though they weren't in a whole lot, like I'm pretty sure even like Cheryl Lawson was in a not in Lawnmower Man, but was in a few of his movies, Brett Leonard's movies, like later on. So I guess he stayed in touch with some of these people, even if they didn't have like particularly super active Hollywood careers.
So I think Brett Leonard kind of like me, like you kind of work with a core group of people that you like working with, and you kind of like try to work with them again on every project. But
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, he's definitely known. I would say that's probably. I mean, that was the one. I'm not seen that movie honestly, but I do remember I had the because it's written by Stephen King, and there's a short story in one of his books called Night Shift, and the short story is called Lawnmower Man. But I don't think the story, and I've read that, but I don't think the story of that is anything like the movie at all. So
I've got the
I've never
story
seen
for
the
you if
movie,
you want
but that was definitely the. Oh, let's hear it.
it. I know all about this. So, um, again, I'm not pulling this shit up to look at it, so I might be wrong on some of this, but I'm pretty sure that the producers of Lawnmower Man and maybe the production house or whatever bought the rights uh to Stephen King's story, The Lawnmower Man. And
Yeah,
so the story, because I'm a huge Stephen King fucking fan, the original story, it would be kind of hard to like pull, stretch it out into a full length movie, but it would make for a fucking disgustingly creepy short film. Anyway, it's about this like overweight dude who is a lawnmower man who gets hired to mow people's yards, and what he does is he's got a lawnmower that like goes like drives by itself, and he strips off all of his clothing. Right, he's like butt naked, this fat, sweaty, naked guy, and while the mower mows, he crawls behind the mower and eats the fucking grass, like the cut grass.
what the hell?
Yes, so that's
And this is this is in the story. This is a short story,
this
or
is
this
the
is the
Stephen
movie.
King story. Yes, so the producer.
Okay, because like I said, I've read that. I just blocked it. It's been like 10 years since I've read it, so I'd forgotten that completely. That's amazing.
Yes, so the producers or whatever, they bought the rights to the story because let's get it, let's get it straight here. uh, Stephen King adaptations were a goddamn dime a dozen from like 1985 or
Yeah,
1983 to like 93. Like there's a good 10-year fucking span of there was like a Stephen King horror movie coming out like every fucking month. Um, so everybody was trying to buy up as whatever rights they could to whatever stories they could to get a movie out there, because that's brand name value. Like that, Stephen King's name on your movie is like guaranteed asses and seats, and in those days. So anyway,
yes.
the producers buy the rights to the Lawnmower Man, and the script bears little to zero fucking resemblance to the actual story. I think the only fucking thing that is the same is there's I think the Jeff Fahey's character's name is Job. I think is the character's name. He's mentally challenged, and he's good at tinkering with stuff. And he's got like a lawnmower that he makes move, I think. Or no, I take it back. He makes the lawnmower move with his telepathic powers that he gets later on in the movie. Anyway, long story short, they
Wow.
they made such a gigantic, huge departure from the story. And when they started advertising for the movie, it was called Stephen King's Lawnmower Man. And I think I'm correct in that Stephen King tried to sue them, or if he didn't try to sue them, he at least caused a stink because it was nothing at all like his story and wanted his name taken off of it. So the movie was finally released as just The Lawnmower Man. But if you find early teaser trailers, you can even find like if you can find like ads and magazines from that day, it would say Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man, and then like later ads and of course later trailers. I think they had scrapped his name because he was so upset that they changed it completely. And that's
All
all
right.
I got to
Well,
say about that.
I kind of want to see that now. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for being frustrated. That would be really annoying. They just completely took his story and trashed it. But I mean, it sounds like some people still like the movie.
Yeah, I like yeah. That's the thing. I like the movie. It's just not again, it's not nothing like the book, but you got to figure when that movie came out, I was like, fuck, like 10, 12, somewhere around there. So
Yeah,
I had not read the story yet. So I didn't have anything to base it off of. So I liked the movie because I wasn't comparing it to anything.
yeah. But yeah, so just bringing it back to Brett Leonard here, I do know a tiny bit about him. So I did want to just shout out really quick. So a lot of this behind the scenes info I just found through various like blogs and reviews and stuff. But some of the just general little, like a couple of these little tidbits that I got from the movie, I listened to an episode of Gruesome Magazine's podcast called Decades of Horror, and they actually do an episode about Dead Pit where they interview Ed Martinez, who did the special effects. So they just kind of talk to him about his experience working on the movie. But anyway, back to Brett Leonard. So this was his first feature, which explains a lot. And supposedly, this is the story behind it. So he was, he was trying to get into movies. He and his friend had teamed up for a Super 8 feature called Serious Problem, which was never finished. And then, he tried to get another movie going and it fell through at the last minute. And so eventually, a producer hired him to shoot action scenes for a film that was called Deadlock. I don't even know if that even came out or became a thing, but he shot these action scenes for it. And the producer was so impressed that he offered to set him up with like $100,000 of a budget to shoot a 35 millimeter horror movie using the same location where they were filming Deadlock. I guess it was at the same hospital in Santa Clara. So when he agreed to give him this money, he was like, "Do you have a script ready?" And Brett Leonard was like, "Yeah, we've got a script ready." And he didn't have a script ready, so he and his writing partner went home and they wrote this screenplay in either 1 week or 3 weeks. I've seen both of those reports. Either way, they wrote it in less than a month, and that explains a lot.
Wow. Well, yep, that kind
Yeah.
of that kind of
So
does explain it.
so like all the stuff that I feel like even he would probably say that he wished he would have fleshed out some of these plot points that we've talked about earlier in the show because he just didn't have time to write it. It was kind of like, we're just going to give you money. You got to just like bang this movie out real quick and wham bam, thank you ma'am, on to the next one. So I couldn't find any info on like how long it took them to actually shoot this. But as far as I know, it was a pretty normal production. It kind of seems like everybody overall had a pretty good time making it. Not nearly as much like drama or anything like with popcorn or anything like that.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. That's Brett Leonard.
Nice. Well, yeah, that like you said, that explains a whole hell of a lot. Um, why some things maybe were very good potential. Because maybe they had some really good ideas.
Yeah.
They just didn't flesh them out enough.
Mm-hmm. And then I did have just one little tidbit about where they shot it. I didn't catch the name of it, but it was an actual asylum in Santa Clara, California at one point, and it's been around since like the late 1800s. So they shot most of the external and internal shots here, except for the actual room with the dead pit that was like just in a warehouse somewhere.
Right.
Um, but the story behind this asylum is that in 1906 there was this huge earthquake in San Francisco, and the asylum basically was destroyed, like it just collapsed, and it was filled with patients. So like a ton of people died, and they just had to like just had to like make a mass grave and put like hundreds of bodies in it. So like
A
I'm
literal
pretty sure
death
that
pit.
place is haunted.
Wow.
Yeah, like so I think partially that is what inspired the script, because they were already shooting at this place for this like action movie that he was working on. So he kind of already was getting the story behind that, and I think that's what partially inspired the script when he didn't have a lot of time to brainstorm ideas.
I mean, whatever works, fucking go with it. That's definitely some good
Mhm.
inspiration for sure.
Yeah. And then, other than that, I honestly couldn't find a lot of information online about this movie. I did find out that there was a DVD slash Blu-ray, release within the past few years that does have some interviews with Brett Leonard and Cheryl Lawson and some of the other cast in it. So I unfortunately didn't get a chance to get my hands on that before recording this episode. But I think, if you like this movie and you're interested in knowing more about some of the perspectives of the people who made it, then I would look up that Blu-ray.
Hell yeah. Um, well, why don't we hop on over and let's talk a little bit about all of the gooey, brain ripping, jello brain melting, raccoon eyed zombie, bloody, gushy effects of the dead pit.
Yeah, I think that is really what shines in this movie. Like you've used all the adjectives that I could use to describe it. It's definitely a goopy, gooey, uh, slimy kind of movie, and I think all of the stuff I mentioned like earlier in the episode, like there's kind of like people's heads are like kind of splayed open with their like skin peeled back, and their skull cut open, and you can see their brain. Like there's a lot of that looks really cool, but I really think the coolest part is towards the end when all the zombies get melted, and when the evil doctor himself gets melted, and it's this long drawn out like goopy, just like fake head slowly like getting like sucked into itself. It's so awesome. I love it.
Yeah, the meltings are very very cool. Not the best meltings that I've ever seen, but they are cool and they are very
It's true.
welcomed. And a somewhat, I hate to say, bland, um, effects driven movie because there's other than like the first 10 minutes, most of the bulk of the movie isn't really anything going on story wise or effects wise. But
Hmm.
thankfully, they pull out all the stops in the last about 15 minutes or so. Um, yeah, like the brain ripping scenes are goofy but fun. The Jello looking brains, when they're walking around holding like the Jello brains,
Just
and
straight up jello.
yeah, absolutely. I love all that kind of shit. And yeah, it's just like who I am. Like the older style effects like that. Like even like the worst effects
Yeah.
are endearing and fun. The only thing that really just kind of bums me out, and it always has, is the actual zombies themselves. Like I remember,
I was gonna say the same thing.
yeah, I remember vividly as a kid, walking into the Video Express, not our podcast, but our podcast namesake, which was my favorite video store growing up. it was a mom and pop video store here in Luray, my hometown. And I remember walking into the Video Express and always just eyeballing and ogling all the VHS horror movie covers because fuck man, back then the VHS covers were just chef's kiss. But the Dead Pit had a
Yes.
fucking fantastic cover, and it was part of a trend in those days. Like I would say, like from like '87 to like mid '90s. Um, if your movie wasn't the greatest horror movie in the world, they went a little extra. They went a little hard on the VHS covers, and I remember Imperial Home Entertainment released Dead Pit, another movie called Metamorphosis, and Black Roses, which is the Michael Thor movie or Michael Thor movie, and they all had like the 3D like embossed like covers. I don't know if that makes sense. But like
Yeah, yeah.
the images on the front of the VHS box were like raised so that you could feel them. And I remember those three specifically had light up eye features. So the Dead Pit cover, it had like this gnarly looking zombie crawling out of the Dead Pit, out of the hole, and you would press a button on the VHS box and his fucking eyes would light up, and that was so
That is
goddamn
so
cool.
cool.
And all it was a goddamn gimmick to get you to either fucking rent the movie or of course buy the movie back in those days. And then you
Mhm.
would take that movie home and you'd be like, fuck yeah, that thing on the cover is amazing. I've got it. I can't wait to see it. And then what you're actually shown is some pasty faced, raccoon eyed zombies. Like it's like somebody just took some fucking white and blue and gray grease paint, smeared it on these motherfuckers, took like some black shoe polish, made a giant circle around their eyes, and said, "Giddy up, get on out there." And it's so
Yeah.
there's a couple zombies here and there that are my favorite word, serviceable. Um, but they do not live up to the hype that fucking VHS cover promised you.
Yeah, I feel the same. They were, a little lackluster, and I think that really drove in the feeling of like, oh, this is just like a haunted house attraction. Like these don't really
Yeah,
seem like real zombies. But I love that you brought up the gimmicky VHS cover. Apparently that really helped the sales. Like it actually did pretty decent. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but according to like IMDb and whatnot, like it seemed to do pretty well solely because of that gimmick.
right,
And it just makes me think, I think it's really cool how how we kind of adapted when home video became a thing because we were talking about during the popcorn episode in like I believe like the 50s and 60s they were doing all these gimmicks in the movie theater with like the tingler and like they'd have like props coming down swinging down through the auditorium or like smells that they'd pipe in just like stuff like that
right.
to make people feel more immersed or just to get people in the seats because even if the movie's not good it's like this whole experience and then you get home video now and they're like how do we get people to watch my random movie and I love that it just was this whole trend of VHS tapes having really goofy kooky
It was
gimmicks to the
I know
covers.
this sounds like such a not really a douchey thing to say, but like it makes me like drives home the fact that it makes me sound even older. Like when I can literally say those were the days. And they seriously were, man. Like
Yeah.
walking into a video store in the '80s and '90s, like was like fucking Candyland, because that sometimes like I'll run into people like for the first like people that I've known online for like years. I'll finally run into them like in person or whatever, and we'll shoot the shit and talk about horror movies. And they're like, "How do you know so fucking much about these movies?" And especially like ones that we talk about on the show, like Dead Pit and Curse to the Bite. Like I'm an only child, and while while other kids were out fucking playing and doing shit, my fat ass was sitting at home eating a can of fucking Ninja Turtle SpaghettiOs and watching these horror movies on VHS. And I never will forget. And I don't think I've told this story yet, and I think it's a fun story to tell because again, we're talking about our namesake, Video Express, which was my hometown video store. Um, the reason that I had to name our show after that video store is because like from like God, dude, like from like the age of like 7 on up until they closed their doors, I rented from them almost every fucking week. And I never will forget, like when I that summer I turned 16 because my birthday falls in August, so I'm kind of like the weird kid in school that's like a little bit older than some other ones because of where my birthday falls.
Yeah.
But I was 16, and my best friend at the time, Joe Snyder, we would every Friday he would either spend a night at my house or I would spend a night at his house, and we would go to Video Express and rent two horror movies to watch that night because Saturday nights I was home at by myself watching Joe Bob. So I was like literally watching two horror movies Friday night and then whatever Joe Bob was showing Saturday night. But I'm gonna try to make this a little bit shorter. But I never will forget the summer that I turned 16. I rolled up in Video Express, and Steve, who was the guy that ran the store, I walked up to the counter and I threw down two movies. I forget what they were. It was probably like Halloween 3 and like Friday 13th Part 7, some shit like that. And he was like, you know what? You've been coming in here every week for like 10 years. He's like, you're one of my best customers. And you're always renting horror movies. He's like, I'll make you a deal. You're always renting the same fucking shit. Why don't you like branch out and like rent some shit that you've never watched before? He said, I'll make you a deal. From now on, you rent one, you get another one for free. And I was like, fuck yeah, this is amazing.
Okay.
So I don't know if you probably never saw Video Express. It's actually where movie stars moved into. But remember like where the naughty.
Okay, so then I have a story tangential to that then
All right, well, do you remember the
after.
naughty section of movie stars?
Yeah,
Okay, well
yeah.
there was no wall there. There was no naughty section. So like you would walk into Video Express and like it was just like from the front of the store like all the way to the back. Like that's how big that place was. And he had like every fucking movie ever made on VHS. So his horror selection was outrageous. So when he promised me rent one, get another one for free, I started in the A's. I went alphabetically. And every Friday,
Oh, wow.
yeah, every Friday from the age of 16 to like 20, something like that. Every Friday I rented two fucking movies. And I made my way like to the T's or some shit like that before he shut down. But I rented some of the most god awful shit that I have ever seen. But if not for him, I would not have the knowledge that I have today. And if not for Video Express, I'd not seen those movies because what's weird is some of those movies um are still not available to this day. They're out of print, and uh, you know companies like Severin and Vinegar Syndrome are slowly finding the rights to these movies and bringing them on Blu-ray for people to see. But a lot of these movies that I watched at that early age were weird, random shit that I have not seen since. And the Dead Pit is I'm kind of circling back around, but the Dead Pit, it goes to show you that was one of the movies that I saw that fucking cover. I had to rent it, and that was one of the ones that I rented when I got to the D's of the rental alphabet. But it was a good time to be alive because even the worst fucking movies that I rented had some of the most amazing covers, and it's definitely an art that I feel like
Yeah.
is lost nowadays. Except for when you get to companies like I said, like Vinegar Syndrome, that puts out like special edition slipcovers that has either the retro art or some like new great art. But I don't feel like we'll ever get back to those days of just walking into a store, knowing not a goddamn thing about this cool looking movie and just renting it, and it's sad.
Yeah, I definitely envy that experience at the Video Express because when I lived in Luray, like you just said, it had then become a movie stars. So when I was growing up going to the video store in the 90s, it was almost nine times out of 10 it was some kind of chain like Movie Stars or Blockbuster. I think Movie Stars is my main one. But I went in there every week and would get stuff with my parents, but like the selection just wasn't the same,
Right.
and it's kind of just gotten worse, especially even with streaming. Like there's a billion movies that you've never even heard of, like on all these different streaming services. But then some of these movies that we've done for the podcast, like I have such a hard time finding anywhere, and so it's really kind of it's a really good reason for people to keep physical media if they have the space and the means to keep it,
Right.
because if the streaming service decides that they don't want it anymore, or if they can't get the rights to it for whatever reason, then it's just gone forever.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think a lot of, you kind of mentioned earlier, like a lot of horror fans might not have this kind of like encyclopedic knowledge, and I think, and I mean myself included, and I think it's because the selection of what we had to watch, people of a certain age and younger, was limited compared to, the 80s and the
Yeah.
early to mid 90s.
Yeah, your generation and younger, for lack of a better term, were spoon fed what you could watch. Um, like movie
Yeah.
stars was lined up with the latest and greatest of what was out now. And when you went to the horror selection where it was like your older shit, like it was such a crummy selection. And me growing up, like I there was not a movie I couldn't get my hands on at that time. Um, and it's weird because
Yeah.
we went through a phase of, I guess, like consolidating and weeding things out that people deemed not good. And now the way media has worked is now we've kind of flipped back around, and now we're craving the things that people at one point deemed shitty. And now we're trying to gobble up as much shit as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I still, even though it was movie stars and the roster was limited in comparison, I still have a ton of nostalgia of just going and hanging out in the horror aisle, cuz like sometimes I'd just be with my parents and they'd be picking out whatever we were going to watch that weekend, and I didn't really pick anything out for myself, but I would just always gravitate to the horror section and just look at the art. So,
Right.
I think cover art is a thing that I hope stays alive. I mean, I have seen a lot of really cool modern horror posters, and just like digital art that they use online. So I'm glad that that tradition has continued. But like, I don't know, nothing compares to just like walking through the aisle and seeing the cover and being like, what the hell is this about? And like
Right.
maybe even having nightmares about just something you saw on a cover of a movie you've never even seen. Like that's totally happened to me.
It's funny because I have a movie, and I don't think I've put it on our list of future episodes, but I have a movie on VHS, pristine VHS. It's still got the cellophane plastic over it, and all I did was like slit the bottom plastic so I could like actually remove the tape to watch it. But anyway, it's called The Radioactive Reporter, and it's a movie that I own, and I have not seen it streaming. I've not seen it anywhere, and it's just like one of those weird, wacko movies that I had on VHS that I just found out as of like 3 or 4 days ago. Somebody on Instagram, I follow a lot of VHS groups on Instagram. Somebody had posted a copy of it, and it was like in a really shitty condition. What's called a cut box, where like the video rental store or whatever at the time had literally cut the front of the box off and slipped it into a clamshell case. But anyway, so this
Yeah.
person had the Radioactive Reporter VHS in a rough shape cut box, and like they wanted $300 for it. And I'm like, what? And
Holy
sure
shit.
enough, I hop on eBay, and there's only like one copy in existence on eBay, and that's going for $300. And I roll over to my fucking VHS collection and I pull it out. I'm looking at this fucking pristine copy. And I'm like, I've got like $500 worth of a fucking VHS in my hands right now. This is the weirdest shit ever.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's just so weird because like
That's
I said,
crazy.
that's where we're at nowadays. Like, evidently, the Radioactive Reporter is
Yeah.
a movie that's lost in time, and nobody's put it out yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the convenience of streaming. I feel like I've got to see a lot of movies that maybe I wouldn't have found before, especially movies from outside of America. But other than that, I would say, there's pros and cons to everything. And, we've clearly just pointed out some of the cons of that, because there's just a lot of movies that are going to be gone forever. So hopefully more places like Vinegar Syndrome and, like you were saying, keep finding stuff to preserve and restore. Um, but I did have another little thing about Brett Leonard that I just remembered that I wanted to say, just to bring it back to the Dead Pit. So throughout his career, he did some movies. He has a movie that I've not seen from like 2005 called Feed. and the synopsis was just too hilarious. Like I had to just say, it's about a serial killer that like force feeds women until they die. He
Oh
just
wow.
feeds them food until they. It's kind of like the fucking like in Seven, like that one guy.
Yeah, the gluttony guy.
And there's a whole movie about it.
Wow. Yeah, what it's called
But the it's called Feed. Yeah, FEED.
Wow.
Um, but you know, we were talking before we kind of went off on our Video Express tangent, which I'm so glad that you shared that story. That's a great story. Um, we were talking about some of the special effects in the Dead Pit, and I think one of the coolest parts for me is the when Dr. Swan gets the pins in his brain.
Right.
So for those of you who haven't seen it, there's you know, at one point he goes to confront Dr. Ramsey, and I don't even remember exactly how it happens, but long story short, he ends up on his table, overwhelmed by the zombies, and Dr. Ramsey proceeds to cut the top of his head off and put a bunch of pins in his brain to scramble him up and make him switch from laughing to crying to screaming in like 2 seconds. And so they have this great, like, pretty realistic, like, fake brain on top of his head with all these pins sticking out of it. And I don't know, something about it is just really kind of disturbing. I think it's the fact that his character is still like awake and alive and conscious and is like reacting to these just pins moving around in his brain.
Right.
And in fact, in the that scene was cut from the American release for being too graphic.
Really?
Yeah, they. I guess I don't know. It was only put back in when what was it? Code Red
Code Red.
did the DVD restoration. And he has a great line reading during that scene where he goes, "Don't cut my brain, don't cut my brain," and
The dude, so
that's just so good.
so the line readings, since you bring it up, um this kind of coincides a little bit of a segue with the effects. Um let's cut right to the ending of this movie. So we've established that
Hmm.
our Looney Tune nun can destroy our dead pit army of zombies with holy water. Very weird. I actually like it. I think it's different. It's cool that these undead
I love
creatures
it.
are, you know, like satanic or something, so they can be melted. They literally are melted with holy water. So again, the whole setup and payoff was beautiful. That she blesses the water tower while our demolition expert goes up there to rig explosives to it to blow up the fucking water tower so the entire asylum can be doused in fucking a river of holy water and melt every motherfucker in its path. It's beautiful. It's a great payoff. It's a great way to take out the zombies and the bad guy. But that goddamn line reading at the very end when it is revealed that Jane Doe is in fact Dr. Ramsey's daughter. Her
Dun
fucking
dun
line
dun.
reading when she finds out that that's her when he comes at her and she goes, "Daddy!" I about shit myself with laughter.
It is it's so good. It's so bad. I mean, it's kind of the same way as her line reading at like the very first scene we see her in, where she's like, "My memories were taken from me."
So it's unfortunate that you guys listening to us cannot see us right now because Katie literally the way she said that and like her look was just as good if not better than the actual character. So yeah, I wish you guys could have seen that.
Yeah. Well, you know, Brett Leonard, if you're listening and you're trying to remake Dead Pit, call me.
God, you know, I feel like I've springing on some tangents tonight. You know, talking about fucking VHS covers and video store memories and all that kind of shit. Um, and I'm gonna try not to go off on a long breathy one on you know on this, but I you bring up remakes, and I've said before in the past that I'm a huge advocate for remakes. I like remakes because I'm not one of those people like
Yeah.
Yeah, while I do hold a lot of original horror movies near and dear to my heart, like somebody remakes it, you're not fucking destroying the original one, so it doesn't matter to me. Like, cool, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a good remake. Cool, that movie sucked. I still got the original one. Or, cool, man, this remake was awesome. Now I like both of them. Like, it's who gives a fuck? The original survives. But
Yeah.
speaking of remakes, this movie could be such a good fucking remake. I think this movie would
Yeah.
for sure like it would be a great what's the word I want to use? I need to stop drinking for these shows. Um anyway, it would be great. It would be great for the Dead Pit. I'm gonna keep that in. Fuck it. It would be great for the Dead Pit to get a fucking remake because yeah, again, all the potential they could add more onto it. They could flesh it out more, and for your sake, Katie, maybe get some more Christian Avengers rolling up in that bitch and melting some more zombies.
Absolutely. We need to
That'd be
add
great.
another one to the team. Um, I love that idea. I also kind of love remakes. I mean, there's obviously some really bad ones, but like that's just going to happen.
Right,
Like I don't know why people get so like personally offended when something they like gets remade because that just means that people like it enough that they think like younger people are going to like it. And I feel like you said, I don't think it doesn't take away from the original. It either adds to it or it just fades into obscurity because it was
right,
bad. Like I think it's always interesting to see new ways people tell the same story.
right,
Like I think about like Black Christmas has like three different versions
right.
and they're all pretty
Choose your own
different.
adventure at this point.
Like pretty seriously, like, especially when you get to 2019, like, it's a total different departure, but, like, I like all of them for different reasons. So yeah, not to get too deep into that rabbit hole, but I'm pro remakes.
Yeah, like let's not get it twisted. We know for a fact that 95, maybe even 97% of these horror remakes they're made for cash grabs. They know they've got a bankable
Yeah.
familiar name and then people are going to go see it whether to genuinely see it out of curiosity or genuinely see it because they know it's going to suck so they can bitch about it. But I've always said the same thing about remakes. You can bitch and you can whine and you can cry about it all you want to. You know you're still going to go see that motherfucker. And
Yes,
and
exactly.
and here's the thing, like a lot of people get tired and pissed off at me for because I preach this a lot. I preach the remake thing a lot. I've preached this remake thing in front of a large crowd at the Alamo Draft House. I was a sponsor at one of the Alamo's events, and they had me as a special guest where I got up and talked in front of a crowd. And just like tonight, I got up in front of them drunk, and I rambled about how people need to stop bitching about remakes. But the reason I am the way I am is because I was one of those people originally. I never will forget in 2000 and what was it 2003, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Like Texas Chainsaw
Mhm.
Massacre, the original, is one of my top 5 favorite horror movies of all fucking time. I think it's one of the most like
Yeah.
genuinely like brilliant movies. And when they announced the remake, I was like, "Fuck this, fuck that! How dare they?" Blah blah blah. And of course, my ass was there opening night to see it in theaters,
Of course.
and it blew my fucking mind. Um, Not to get all
I
Adam
fucking
Sandler
love that
about it,
movie.
but
That remake is so good.
it's so fucking good, and I think to this day it's still one of the best remakes. But
Absolutely.
we talked about today as the anniversary of the 2006 Hills Have Eyes. That movie, I don't
Yeah.
know if this might be a hot take, but that is a remake that is better than the original. And yes,
Sometimes that
I
happens.
know Wes Craven made the original one, but I'm sorry. Just because Wes Craven is Wes Craven does not mean that it was a great film. The only thing memorable about the original Hills Have Eyes is Michael Berryman. And, because he's
Mhm.
got a very specific look and a very memorable look. And
Yeah.
if you take Michael Berryman out of that movie, it's no better than the other drive-in crap that was coming out in the Grindhouse era at that time. but because of who made it and
Yeah.
because Michael Berryman's, image is what carried that movie on for so long. But they came out the fucking they came out swinging with the remake, and they improved on every beat and they knocked it out of the park. That and Chainsaw is two of the best horror movie remakes to come out in
Mhm.
in the past 20 years or so. But anyway, enough about remakes.
Yeah.
Dead Pit definitely could use one.
I'd love it. I'd love to see that.
All right, so let's go ahead and turn the lights a little low and get ready to wrap things up. Katie, tell me your final thoughts. Give me your epitaph on the Dead Pit.
Okay, so I think I don't I can't say that I like this movie because I don't know how much I'm gonna watch it again,
Right,
to be perfectly honest. But you know, I don't think it's all bad. I think, we've definitely talked about some of the more endearing moments. It is 100% worth a watch. Like if you like just like goopy gore, if you like supernatural shit, if you just like seeing a super hot late 80s babe run around with her big hair and her underwear, like there's just a little something for everybody in this movie.
absolutely.
So, I think it's definitely worth a watch. Um so yeah, I mean, I I fully agree that I think this would be a great movie to remake because I think a remake is a good opportunity to improve on something that maybe kind of like fell flat when it originally came out.
Right.
So I think you could only improve and expand on this story. Like I think the framework is there and the idea is there. Like they had a really good idea, but maybe if they hadn't only had a week to write it, it would have been a little bit better.
Absolutely, I agree on all fronts. Let me ask you this: if if somebody like kidnapped you, okay, and
Okay.
they're about to drop you out of a helicopter with a parachute and a DVD and a TV and a Blu-ray or a DVD player to watch, and they said you've only got two choices. This is the only movie you'll ever be able to watch for the rest of your days: Curse to the Bite or Dead Pit. Who you going with?
Oh, oh no. Okay, I think damn, that's hard. I kind of think I'd pick the Dead Pit to be perfectly honest cuz like Curse 2 was cool and maybe it's a slightly better made movie than the Dead Pit, but it's just I don't know, something about Dead Pit seemed a little bit more memorable to me. I feel like I would just rather watch something like that. I think I just like the setting more,
Yeah,
whereas like in Curse 2 they're just like driving around the desert for a lot of it. So
yeah. I would say I would go with you on that one. I would say I would probably pick Dead Pit. However, if Curse 2 had Jill Scholen walking around in the same outfit that Cheryl Lawson walked around in, then we would probably go
that's
Curse
fair.
2. But I would go with Dead Pit. So with that said, if you're going to be stuck on a tropical island with only Dead Pit in tow to watch for the rest of your life, maybe you could go ahead and tell me what is your favorite scene in the Dead Pit.
So I think I'm kind of torn between two. One of them is strictly for aesthetic reasons, and that is, and I don't quite remember exactly when this happens in the movie, but there's one point where Jane Doe, and I've mentioned this earlier in the episode too, like she's running through the hallways, running away, and she's got to like get through this like broken glass, like window into another wing of the asylum and whatnot, and it's just got this really cool lighting, and like everything is just like they're in like the abandoned wing of the hospital, so
Mhm.
everything's empty and eerie, and it's just like curtains blowing and no furniture, and it's got this great blue and red lighting with like the white light coming in through the shutters, and I just love it so much. I just think it looks great. It's like the best looking part of the movie in my opinion. um that being said, I think I'm a big fan of the scene where I guess the scene where you first find out that the holy water melts the zombies,
Yes.
because the Claire the nun and the zombie melting and all that stuff, it's just so charming and unexpected because you know you get the feeling that it's a supernatural something going on, but I didn't know they were going to take this like pseudo religious angle with it. So it just was like a pleasant surprise that like, oh, holy water melts these zombies. So that was my favorite, I think. But what was your favorite?
So I'm torn between two scenes as well. Um, while I would say and should say that that very scene that you just talked about, the our pseudo Looney Tune nun, our big shock of her melting zombies with actual holy water is definitely my favorite scene. I will also say that the hose down is probably
Why did
my
I
other.
know that you were going to say that?
So
I was just
for
sitting here like he's leading up to it, and I know he's going to fucking talk about the hose.
so for people that's not seen this movie, our lead character of Jane Doe is she's strung up by her wrist, and one of the like, and I think it's a dream sequence or what, it's a nightmare sequence.
It's a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the like evil head nurses comes in with a fucking fire hose and starts hosing her down, and it just magically rips off Jane Doe's tank top as her titties are all out getting splashed with water, and there's no reason for it to happen, but goddamn, I'm glad it happened. So I would say that's probably my favorite scene.
Okay, I like that. I that actually reminded me, just a quick sidebar about the hosing scene. I had a little tidbit about that.
Oh,
So, apparently the shirt that she was wearing, it had like dissolvable thread in it or something to just like make it rip super easy. Like it wasn't just a regular shirt. Like it was literally something designed to kind of like get dissolved by the water.
I just figured
But also,
it was like Hulk Hogan's t-shirt, like it had like little pre-rips in it. So like the
yeah,
slightest bit of force would rip it off, cuz it literally looks like fucking like
yeah.
Hulk Hogan, like that shit just like rips off and then boobs fly out.
Oh, it just melts off. Yeah, and then so towards the end of that scene, if you weren't too distracted by her breasts, there's a part like right at the end before she wakes up where the hose hits her in the face and it like caves her face in, like a chunk of her cheek like gets caved in like by this water. And Ed Martinez, who did some of the special effects, like said in this interview that it was literally like that little piece was just attached to a little piece of string, and he was standing off camera and had to just like yank it really quick at the right time. And I just think it's just funny to see something that seems kind of like intense and then picture kind of like the zoom out and there's like 10 people standing around and there's just like a guy with a piece of string like pulling on her face.
I'm
But
all
yeah,
struck.
I
I'm all struck right now. So I've seen this movie probably a total of 4 times, maybe 5 at the most, right? 5 at the most.
mhm,
I have never ever noticed as part of her cheek flies off. Never.
amazing.
And it happens while she's topless?
Go watch it again. Yeah, it's literally the like last like half second before she wakes up from the nightmare abruptly. It's like the thing that triggers her waking up. Like they show her topless getting sprayed with the hose, and then they do a close up of her face while she's screaming, and the water kind of moves up to her face and it stays on there for a couple of seconds, and at the very last second you can see like a chunk missing from her face.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was blinded by the boobies, I guess.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, we've made it to the end here, and now it is time for your favorite part of the show. So, Matt, where does the Dead Pit rank on the TNA meter?
So, bruh, I'm telling you right now, Cheryl Lawson again. Girl looks great walking around in her tank top and undies. Again, like she should be out on a fucking Whitesnake video, music video. Not only that, then the aforementioned topless hose down scene. So I'm going to give the Dead Pit. I'm going to give it a generous 7 out of 10 stars on the TNA meter. 7 out of 10.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think Cheryl she makes up all 7 of those points pretty much, but I did remember something.
At
Okay, you
least
know
2 of them.
how in an earlier episode we talked about how there's there's always that one kid who's like, if you pause it just right,
Oh
you
yeah,
can see
me.
the nipple, and you're saying that's you. Well, maybe you've just warped my brain now, but I happened to notice that there's a zombie boob at one point
Get the fuck out of
also.
town.
One of the zombies, like, her shirt is just, yeah, one of the zombies, like, towards the end, her shirt is either like wet and like see-through, or it's just gone. I don't know, but I was just like, oh, there's a zombie titty. Like, what's up?
Well, so I'm gonna have to watch Dead Pit
Are you
again,
proud?
and this time I'm going to have to cut down from like 8 hams beers to like maybe just 3, and really focus this time,
Yeah.
and try to spot the cheek flying off and zombie titty, because those are things that I need to witness. Um, but I guess that brings us to an end of another gory, gooey, brain smashing, titty filled episode. Do you got any last words for our fine folks at home?
And no, I just that, I think this is worth a watch. So if you haven't seen it and you like this sort of thing, which if you're listening to this, you probably do. I did manage to find it on Tubi streaming for free, but apparently it's also on Amazon Prime if you have a subscription. At least as of the time we are recording this, but these things change quickly, so I don't know.
Absolutely. And you know what, Katie? I hope that this is our 5th episode of Video Express. I I really hope at some point we can watch a movie that we disagree on. But so far we're 5 out of 5. Um and
Yeah,
and
that's
it's funny
true.
because making this list of movies, I tried to throw curveballs in. I'm like, oh, she'll probably like hate this shit. And you have ate up every goddamn bit of movie I've thrown your way, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm pretty generous. I'm a pretty generous movie watcher. Like, I can get really critical if I needed to be. Like, I mean, I could roast this movie to hell if I needed to,
Right.
but I figure if I'm entertained, and if I can glean some positivity out of a movie, that I will do my best to try to find it, even if it's not, I'm not really going to be like itching to watch The Dead Pit anytime soon, but I wouldn't say it's a total lost cause. Like, you have to be pretty bad for me to be like, do not watch
Yeah.
this.
So, yeah, every movie that we're gonna do, you'll always hear me say, at least give it one chance. Because I love, like I said, I
Yeah.
genuinely pretty much love everything that I've got on this list. And even though I hadn't seen Dead Pit in a long time, and it's not nowhere near as good as I remembered it being, again, I still do think that it deserves at least one viewing, whether you're inebriated or not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it. That's all we have for this episode of Video Express. We want to thank our sponsor, Lunch Meat. Lunch Meat VHS is your #1 destination for the appreciation, celebration, and preservation of VHS and video store culture. Check out their website at lunchmeatvhs.com and explore their store full of old school horror goodies on VHS, apparel, and much, much more. You can also follow them on Instagram at lunchmeatvhs.
Yes, thank you, Lunch Meat. We also want to thank everyone who tuned into our show tonight and listened. It's really awesome that anyone would listen to this, so thank you. If you have any thoughts about The Dead Pit, or if you want to suggest a movie for us to cover one day in the future, or if you just want to pop in and say hi, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram, both under at Video Express Pod. So come give us a follow.
Yep. Thank you guys for stopping into the video store tonight, renting a movie, and hanging out with us behind the counter. We thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us. We actually have a great time sitting down and two friends talking about some old school horror and VHS fun. Until next time, though, just remember, please be kind, rewind, but most importantly, just be kind. My name is Matt,
And I'm Katie.
and we'll catch you on the next episode of Video Express.
Bye bye.